Hi guys, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre. The Nehru Centre is the cultural wing of the Indian High Commission in the UK, and we've been in existence for many decades, and we organize wonderful events at this very auditorium, which is in Mayfair in central London. Sadly, as you can see, the auditorium is empty. It has been empty since we were all put into lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. But what we Indians believe is that the other side of a crisis is an opportunity. And what we have done at the Nehru Centre is moved all our events online. So now if you attend our online events, every single seat is a VIP seat. Like you get a front row at our events. No trouble of parking, no trouble of travelling all the way. And most practically all the programs that we would do, like literary discussions and dance performances, musical performances. We are doing them all on our online channels. You can register for our newsletter at our website nehrucentre.org.uk. You don't need to write them down. They will be displayed at the bottom of the screen. You can also come to our Facebook page, which is a verified page, the Nehru Centre. You can follow updates on all our events on Twitter as well, the Nehru Centre. That's also a verified account. Or you can come to our YouTube channel. Again, the Nehru Centre. We are nothing if not consistent. I hope you do come to our online channels and enjoy the events that we are putting up for you. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Namaste. Jai Hind.
Namaste, my name is Amish. I'm the director of the Nehru Centre, and this event is actually taking me back to my days in college, a book I'd read at that time. There are some books which inspire you. There are some books which you get lost in. There are some books which entertain you, and there are some books which leave you in awe of the wisdom of the author. I had the good fortune of reading such a book during my college days. It was called God, Sages and Kings by David Frawley, who is better known as Vamadeva Shastri ji. And I had the immense pleasure of meeting him actually more than a decade later, when I myself had become an author. Actually nearly 2 decades later. My God, I'm old. Okay, and I'd met him at a conference in Goa, and I found that the man himself was as wise and as inspiring as his book that had left me in awe all those years ago. And a few years later, I met his wife as well, Shambhavi ji, and both of them are so inspiring in the way they approach dharma. If David Frawley ji is more Vedantic, is more the path of the Gyan Yoga, of knowledge, of debate, of reading, of discovery. Shambhavi ji is the instinctive power of the mother goddess, and she is obviously a worshipper of the mother and a Shakti form. And it's such a delight to have both of them on stage here. They are backstage. If we can just bring them up here. Namaste, Vamdev ji. Namaste, Shambhavi ji. How are you?
Namaste, Pranam. Good.
What a wonderful pleasure to meet the both of you again, albeit virtually. Hopefully, we will be able to meet in person once again soon. But before we get on to the conversation, I thought, why don't I complete the formalities? I gave an introduction from the heart earlier. Now let me do the formal bureaucratic introduction from the paper.
Okay.
Padma Bhushan David Frawley, Pandit Vamadeva Shastri ji, is a Vedacharya and author of over 40 books on yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, Vedic knowledge, and Hindu Dharma overall. He is the founder and director of the American Institute of Vedic Studies, which can be found on www.vedanet.com. Dr. David Frawley ji's wife, Yogini Sambhavi ji, is one of the most important and dynamic women teachers of the deeper aspects of yoga coming out of India today, widely respected worldwide and in traditional circles in India. Her teachings are rooted in the ancient teachings and traditions of Bhakti Yoga, Shakti Sadhana, and Jyotisha, which is Vedic astrology, Mantra Yoga, and Ayurveda. She is the co-director of the American Institute of Vedic Studies. To my backstage, if we can get Vamadev ji and Shambhavi ji back. If you have anything to add in that boring bureaucratic, I'm sorry I had to do that. We are the Nehru Centre. We are a government place. We have to follow what's there on paper.
Very important.
But let me start this conversation with where all good conversation should begin, which is at the beginning. Vamadev ji, you were born in the US, in America.
Correct.
What was your childhood like, and what is it that pulled you towards dharma?
Yes, a very big question. I was born in a family of 10 children, second of 10. I have 7 younger sisters, like Lord Skanda. Pleiades. And it was a Catholic family. We had Catholic education. Midwest, La Crosse, Wisconsin. We also had grandparents had a huge farm, and we often visited there. So it was a totally different world. Nothing Indian about it. Only 2 things that could connect me to India. One, coming to my grandparents' farm, there was a rock like an elephant, which they call the Elephant Rock. And of course, they had a huge dairy farm. So I had cows and elephants to begin with. And we had a kind of ordinary Catholic education, but we eventually moved to Denver, Colorado in the Rocky Mountains, which gave me a little more views and different understanding, broader education. And then in my teenage years, I began exploring different teachings and traditions, the late 60s. And in that context, I had a very, for some reason I don't know, very curious mind of my own. And I studied all the different philosophies of the West. And then I moved over also to the philosophies of the East. And eventually I settled into the Vedanta as the ultimate philosophy before the time I was 20 years old.
Wow.
And then, at that time there were also, Yes,
Sorry.
At that time there were also various gurus from the East whose teachings were there, and Yogananda's I came to first, and then Ramana Maharshi, Sri Aurobindo, etc. And beyond that, we can go other questions.
Fascinating. Shambhavi ji, how old was he when you met him? And what was your first impression?
Very delightful and very interesting. I remember he had come to Delhi, and I had managed through Lokesh Chandraji. I was escorting with Lokesh ji, and we'd gone to meet Vamadeva ji. And when I entered the room, he was sitting on a low kind of a little divan. And there was this, I remember his eyes kind of lit up, whether it was seeing me or whether it was just natural. And there was this light around him. And I thought, wow, I'd read his book for about 10, 12 years, or maybe 15, the Tantric Yoga book on the Devis. And I think he was magical. Very beautiful, very gentle, very soft. I was very drawn to the energy.
And I must say that you may have read his book, on Shakti Ma. But as we were joking backstage, Shakti Ma seems to have helped your internet connection a lot more than Vamadev ji. Just for everyone to know, we were discussing backstage, and they're both in the same house but in different locations. And Vamadev ji's internet connection is actually stronger than Shambhavi Ji's, but her picture is coming clearer. The power of the Mother Goddess. But Vamadev Ji, when you were drawn to Vedanta, and it's really intriguing to explore this as someone who has, who through most of your formative years were in a different tradition. What do you think the Indian traditions and dharma, why did it end up meaning so much to you? And in that sense, what can it end up meaning to the larger West?
Yes. Well, the philosophy, the ideas of karma, rebirth, self-realization, universal consciousness, that was the philosophical side. And then, of course, the great gurus, Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, Paramahansa Yogananda, Ramakrishna. We didn't have such figures in the West. So these, their lives and their teachings and their personalities also draw me in. And then I also picked up the Sanskrit language, and the Sanskrit language, the beauty of the mantras, all those things came together as well. I had studied some Buddhism, Taoism, and similar ideas, but I didn't quite resonate so much with their philosophy. And I'd studied the philosophies of the West, including the existentialism and Marxism. I found them to be quite dreary and quite limited to the physical world. So that exploration, I think, was more personal. And obviously, there were strong karmic connections that I had for whatever reasons. In fact, I can tell you something that would be very surprising for people. I discovered the Vedas, Upanishads, Vedanta first, but in the work of Sri Aurobindo, I also found Rig Veda, which is the oldest Vedic text. And strangely, I can say that finding that book when I was 20 years old, I found it to be easier to understand and more relevant than the library and the shopping malls and the university that I was involved with. So that can tell you something of how I had a very different view and an understanding I had from an early age of poetry and symbolic language, as well as philosophy, again, for reasons I don't know, contemplation of mountains or past life karma, we could say.
Fascinating, fascinating. Shambhaviji, if I can come to you on this, because, in the Indian way, there are various ways that we look at, darshana, which is essentially seeing the divine in the divine, or in each other. And there is a path that is driven through Gyan Yoga, through the exploration of knowledge, through reading, through discussions, through the path of the Guru, sitting at the feet of the Guru and learning. And there is this instinctive path where you surrender, and let the divine just hold your hand and just take you ahead. And this path is the strongest in the Shakta traditions, the traditions of the Mother Goddess. I, being a Shaivite, of course, many Shaivites come close to the Shakta traditions as well. There's a reason why I often look to you like a mother figure. So if you can take us through that this instinctive path of the Mother Goddess, for many in this audience who may not be introduced to it at all. So if it's like a layman introductory thing, that what is that path like?
For me, I think Devi just embraced me, and I experienced her, I felt her. So my entire spiritual path was one of sheer experience. I was never into knowledge, wanting to read and go here, go there. But I trusted in the original Guru, which is Bhudevi and Mahaprakriti. And luckily, I spent my young years in a convent in the Himalayas. So I think the Shakti of the Himalaya also embraced me. So for me, when I always realized as a young girl that there was something amazing and powerful, in the universe out there. And I used to challenge the system and say that if you are there and if there are these powers there, then you teach me, you come to me, you show me. And Devi appeared very early in my life. And I think I never looked back. I never needed a human being or a book to teach me that there is that wisdom and power and energy out there. So my experience is very beautiful, very deep.
Oh, beautiful.
Very simple.
Yeah. No, there's such simple power in in the Shakta traditions. There's things which often cannot be described. Vamadeva ji, you will remember this. When we had when my sister and we had come to Gangaji with you and Shambhavi ji, and you'd taken us to the cave where it is believed that Saptarishi Vasishtha ji and of course his another cave where Arundhati ji had meditated. Can you tell us about and I remember the feeling I'd had when I'd gone into that cave, like there was this very powerful Jagruti, which was kind of washing over me. If you can take us through the meditating traditions, why did they go to the caves? What is the power that was tapped with those traditions? And how it helps us balance ourselves?
Yes. Well, also, I came into contact with the teachings of Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, chief disciple of Ramana Maharshi, who was a great Shakta and mantra yogi at various levels. And then Ramana's teaching about the guha, the cave, the cavity of the heart, the Dahara Vidya, which we find in the Chandogya Upanishad, and the sense that the entire universe dwells within us in the cavity of the heart, the small space within the heart. So the outer cave is a symbol of the inner cave. And that cave of the heart, it's the smallest infinitesimal point that holds all infinity. If you move through that point, you move from the limited outer world to the unlimited inner world of pure consciousness. So that is the symbolism. The cave, the Vasishtha Guha, sacred to Vasishtha, also taken on by Swami Purushothamananda and sacred in the Ramakrishna tradition. But many great gurus, Anandamoy Ma, Devaraha Baba, so many had been there. So the tapas also energizes the cave. And we experience that, the silence, the connection to the earth, so that from the earth and from the inner cave, we can connect and enter into the entire universe of consciousness, light, transformation, boundless self-awareness.
It's sorry, just to ask a bit more on that why is it then that often the first experience for someone who's never been there, who's not prepared for it, is such intense emotion?
Yes.
Why does that happen? And one almost has to wait for the emotion to calm down before one can actually start exploring, with that calmness and learning. So why does that happen? In especially in special gufas like this, why does that happen?
Because you're entering into a different dimension of consciousness, a doorway to the universe, energized again by the tapas of the rishis. And you're there because there's something in you that resonates with the cave. So that karmic connection comes up. It may be a past life connection. It just may be an inner awareness connection. But that is there also. So that direct experience, and the cave is to get you to bring that direct experience, the anubhuti, out, so that we can directly experience our lives, our being, our consciousness, because ordinarily we're caught in the outer senses and stimulation. So by that direct awareness, we then can have that ultimate feeling of unity. So that, of course, must come first.
At that same experience, Shambhavi ji, we'd also done Ganga Aartis, every evening, and it was so beautiful. And the beauty, emotions, spirituality aside, there is a far deeper environmental consciousness in the traditional Indian way, which is less ego driven. I've been living in the West for the last 9-10 months in London, but one finds, and it is good, we must have an environmental movement. Of course we must. I mean, it's for our own good. I mean, we don't need to save Mother Nature, we need to save ourselves. But one finds that there is a certain amount of ego, often unnecessary aggression, in the environmental movement in the West, which one doesn't find in the Indian way. And often what ends up happening is, you may be saying the right things, but if you say it in an aggressive way, you don't get the right response. People react negatively to it. Can you take us through what your understanding of the Indian approach to the environment is, to Mother Nature is?
I think the beauty and blessing of being, born and experiencing the world through Bharat, through India, is that we have taught to trust the universe. So there is that deep feeling of being able to surrender to the universe, to the divine, to Shakti, to Shiva. I think what happens in the West is it's very hard for them to come to that place of surrender. So only in spirituality, I feel, unless you can't surrender, and that comes from a little child within us. I think here, everyone's childhood, of course, even us. I mean, who hasn't had, a difficult childhood with trials and tribulations? But there's a particular nurturing because we have connected to Bhudevi. We connect, we honor
To Mother Earth,
trees,
to
we
Bhudevi.
worship trees, we worship the rivers. So Ganga, I mean, Ganga is Devi. We call her a river, but I remember when I wanted to heal, in my early 30s, when life brought its trials and tribulations, I went to Ganga. And I just surrendered. I was like a little girl. I cried. I let her take all my, my mind, my emotions, and asked her to heal me. I didn't go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist because I thought no human being really understood what I had experienced or what I was experiencing. But because she is the all embracing Shakti, I guess she knew my strengths, my weaknesses. But I must say that to experience the divine, there are two main factors which are very important when we are embarking on the spiritual path. One is to heal, and heal in every way, emotionally, mentally, physically, the thoughts, your expression. And to be strong in the Mooladhar, the Sthira Shakti. I think every guru and teacher needs to first teach these two aspects before they initiate any sadhak. Now, the rishis did it beautifully because they were nature. So when a sadhak approached the rishi for learning, Bhudevi, you were sitting on the earth, you were amidst the trees. So Mother, the Shakti came and did the work. Today we are meeting all these people in high-flying buildings and very fancy places, everything is cemented. There's no Guru Ma there. There's no Bhudevi. So everybody's learning, but we're short-circuiting because these powers are electrical. And our bodies, our minds, our emotions are not able to take that lightning Shakti, absorb it, and then, pehle wo bhasma karti hai. She finishes everything. Then we rise from the ashes in bliss and beauty. So that's very important, I think.
I think it's so true, Shambhaviji, what you're saying, that often I think people end up in this modern day of fast food, fast communication, and we want healing and spirituality also in a instant 2 minute. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to let it flow. Someone had told me this, in a very beautiful way, that Ganga ji, it's a wrong translation to think she washes away your sins. What she washes away are your negative emotions. She washes away your negative emotions. So she takes on the burden of your negative emotions so that you can start life once again. So that's a beautiful way.
She heals.
And the power of Bhudevi, power of Mother Earth. Coming again to the benefits of balance and tradition, Vamadev ji, I mean, if I can quiz you something on Ayurveda, there's a very interesting conversation I'd had with with a medical doctor in India. My elder brother had regrettably got COVID a month and a half back. In fact, he was hospitalized, Anish Dada, but he's out now. He's recovered completely. And I was speaking to one of the doctors. He said something very interesting, which actually hadn't struck me till he said that. He said that we are told that pandemics normally arise in countries that have a lot of congestion, that have a lack of hygiene. Normally, that's where it's that live in close quarters, that are overpopulated. But he said, have you noticed that in the last 150 years, not one pandemic has arisen in India? We've been the victims. We've imported pandemics that have arisen in other countries, but we have never exported a pandemic. Many of these pandemics have come from China, some from Europe, some from North America, but India has never been a source of these pandemics for the last 150 years. And he was a doctor of Western medicine. So he says, I don't know what the reason is, but it needs to be researched because there must be something right that we're doing. Right? And are there learnings for the world from that? What do you think of that? And is Ayurveda and perhaps an answer?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the pandemics come in when our immunity is low. And we have physical, psychological, and also spiritual immunity. And these are based upon our connection with our environment and our connection with our deeper self and higher consciousness. Also, our cultivation of prana. So if we look at the modern world today, the urban West, well, first of all, it's a very drug-based medicine. Then it is also a very hectic environment where there's little prana, positive prana, where there's little positive, silent, deeper interaction with others and with nature as a whole, and where people are taught to be very reactive. The sage is said to be someone who cannot be affected by flattery or insult. And in the West now, you can't say anything about anyone because someone will be triggered. So that indicates a very weak psychological immunity. The physical immunity, the poor food, the lack of cooking at home, the lack of natural food, the restaurants, the artificial air. And then the psychological issue connected to the spiritual issue is that instead of cultivating inner peace and universal awareness, we're getting caught up in all these reactive opinions of the mind. I sometimes tell people that the mind itself is a pathology and often an addiction because we get caught up in a lot of negative thoughts and reactions. So in India, in Bharat, there is still that connection with nature, with the temples, with the Himalayas, the pujas, the mantras, the rituals, even in the home. In the West, people are rootless, or they're caught in political or ideological belief systems that divide and limit them. So this immunity is low. People are moving too fast, mind is moving too fast, electronic energies are disrupting our personal prana, and we don't take the time, particularly first thing in the morning and last thing at night, to ground ourselves back into our inner awareness and to let go and detoxify the mind. Even this current pandemic is as much a psychological pandemic as it is a physical one. There is so much fear, there is so much conspiracy theories, there is so much division, there are old hatreds coming up. There are all kinds of things that are not connected to the physical disease. But even the physical disease is basically affecting those who have low immunity, whether by age, by overwork, by pre-existing conditions. So it's telling us that our current high-tech way of life, contrary to nature, often very much against nature, is weakening this deeper immunity. And this immunity is not just our personal physical immunity, it's the immunity of the planet, which is the integrity of the biosphere, that we are also compromising with the pollution, with all the noise, the travel, the electrical energy, the satellites. So we cannot be healthy as individuals if we are not healthy as a planet. So that message is also there. Big wake-up call for us to turn within, honor nature, and honor our universal connection.
Well, I think what you said is so deep in its simplicity, Vamadevji, that we need to detoxify our mind and spiritually as well. I love that thought. Rishi is someone who doesn't get impacted by flattery or insults. And most modern human beings are so susceptible to both. Honestly, very. Uh, if there's something which Vamdev ji said, which I can come to you with, Shambhavi ji, he said, and I agree, and it's deeply insightful what he said, that what we do in the morning, as soon as we wake up, and what we do in the night before going to sleep, it's so important to have the right spiritual and mental approach at that point of time. It kind of makes the day better for us. Are there any practical suggestions that you would give, that many of us who would be leading ordinary lives may not be as deep into our knowledge and our traditions as the two of you? What can we do in the mornings and in the nights before going to sleep? One obvious thing: stay away from the damn phone. But what else?
I think it's important what I do every morning when I wake up, at least for about 5-7 minutes. I always say a prayer of gratitude that it's another day that I am gifted to experience the beauty and bliss of nature, the blessings of sharing my life with Vamadeva ji. I mean, that's the biggest blessing I think I have. And what happens is in the morning, people rush. I think when you rush, you are already joining a race. But when you move very gradually into a space of awakening, then you are more conscious. And I always, in the morning, very silently, most times even in bed, just do a Ganesha Mantra, because just to allow it to ground the energies. And the Ganesha Mantra I do has beautiful Shakti Bijas. So invoking that Shakti energy. And again, in the night, it's a beautiful time to reflect and, create a space which is going to draw you into its deeper wisdom when you sleep. So the evening and nighttime is very beautiful. I mean, my place turns magic. I have all these lights, and of course, I have all my diyas. That's another very important ritual is lighting a diya. It gives protection, and you connect with the Agni of nature, the Agni of the earth, the Agni within you, the Jathar Agni, the Agni of the mind, the Agni of the emotions. So the Diya for me is a great reminder in every way of deeply connecting to the divine. For me, that's very important.
How
The
beautiful.
Diya begins to speak to me.
How beautiful. And there's a comment that's just come up by Rakesh Mathur that I feel a sort of levitation just hearing this conversation. A tribute to you, Vamadev ji and Shambhavi ji. We're going to take a short break now. We'll go backstage. They'll just play a message on Mother India, and then we'll come back and I'll come to a conversation I want to have, Vamadev ji, on the seal that you have behind your shoulder. We'll come to that. Let's take a break now.
Racing has taken me all over the world, but when I put on the helmet, I am still in India. India, where I found yoga.
Slow down, breathe.
I have breathed in India's magic. I have felt its warmth. Yoga has taught me the truth about life and motorcycles. That the more still you are, the further you can go.
Incredible India.
Welcome back, everyone. Vamadev ji, if I can make a short comment, and from what I can see, it looks like an Indus Valley seal. Am I right? Behind your shoulder?
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I couldn't see Indus Saraswati Valley. Sorry, I couldn't see.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. For those who couldn't see it clearly, it looks. It is a seal from the Indus Saraswati Valley. And Vamadev ji, if I can ask you a question, and of course on the, on the symbology out there as well, if you want to speak of it, and more deeply into this conversation that we are told repeatedly of, the so-called Aryan invasion theory, or now the Aryan migration theory. If you want to tell us your views on that.
Well, first of all, I started studying the Rig Veda in the original Sanskrit at the age of 20. I spent many hours every day doing that. And I studied it from a more yogic perspective through the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and then later Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni and others. And in the process, I also, all throughout my childhood, had this honoring of the ancients in different traditions. So I had a sense that the ancient world had something more. And also, as we go back in time, we can sense the spirituality, whether it's the pyramids of Egypt or the mantras of the Vedas. So as I went into the Vedas, I found that very deep yogic spirituality connections. I did a whole book. My first book was a connection between early Upanishads all the way back to Vedas, which came out through the Aurobindo Ashram in 1980. So that was my background. And in the process, I cataloged, just for my own purpose, 150 references to the ocean in the Rig Veda, including boats crossing the sea. So I was understood it to be a maritime culture. It was quite obvious. So when I came into contact with the historical views, Aryan invasion and so forth, I could see that these were totally fabricated. They had no place in the literature. They said, oh, there's no temples there, and yet there are verses, Sahasra Dwara, Sahasrastuna, temples with 1,000 pillars, 1,000 doors. There are so many references. They pulled out of context and take some minor thing, references to cities, to armies, to empires, all of that is there. And the grace, of course, the Saraswati River as the central homeland. And then later on, when I did this God, Sages, and Kings, which came out around 1990 or 1991 in the West, the information about the Saraswati River was just coming up, that it was a real river. And so the whole Rishi thing was clear. It was an advanced civilization linguistically, philosophically, spiritually. We had the idea of 7 rivers flowing into the ocean. We had the idea of 2 oceans, 4 oceans, ocean of the sky. We had rishis connected to the ocean like Vasishta, Vishwamitra, Agastya. So totally different view. And so I challenged that view. In myth of the Aryan invasion, there never was any archaeological evidence for it. There were no real ruined cities by outsiders. The invasion was fabricated, even though some of the British archaeologists knew of the Saraswati River there at that time, like Oldham. And since then, so much has come out relative to archaeological sites, geological work, more recently genetics. So there is really no basis for it. But because Western civilization, particularly Europe, saw the Aryans as their original homeland, they have a kind of issue. They say, oh, Indians are being political about it. But they were political about it from the beginning. And with the whole German nationalism, not even Russian nationalism, they want the Aryans to be closer to them, and they want to define them more as an ethnicity or a race or a language. And yet it's the Vedic language that overshadows, the Vedic rishis that overshadows all the Indo-European peoples, you may call them. There's an out of India movement we can trace through the steppes of Central Asia and also north of the Black Sea. There's so many things we can do. All of this is changing, as you know, but there is a tremendous resistance because it changes the entire model of history for the planet, and particularly for the Europeans, not just for India. And I'm also very happy that you have endorsed that and spoken on it and taught it in various ways in your own work.
I've only done a very small contribution. You've done such a deep scholarly take on that. But yes, you're right. I mean, a lot of this is also perhaps driven by ego. I mean, they would want to see themselves as the progenitors of civilizations rather than the recipients of it. So, but it's ego to see anything as origin or recipient. We are all beneficiaries of, and I guess that is perhaps the best way to look at it. Do you have any thoughts on? Have you read of the research that happened at Rakhigarhi and at Sanoli now? And do you have any thoughts on how that adds to this conversation? The chariot that was discovered at Sanoli, which obviously pushes back, because you had spoken of horses of the lesser number of ribs being native to India. So if you have any thoughts on that too.
Yes, I've been in touch with Vasant Shinde and Neeraj Rai, who were behind a lot of that work. So I'm definitely familiar with it. And the genetics shows, first of all, that the basic population of India is the same and indigenous over the last 5,000 years. So there's no genetic trace of any steppe people coming in ancient times, even only slight genetic information even after 1000 BC. So the genetics has changed that. As you said, there is the finding of chariots going back 4,000 years in India at the Sanoli site. So the idea that the Aryans came in with chariots is rather absurd because the chariots were already there. And relative to the horses, the genetics of the horses have shown that it is the 34-ribbed horse found in India that's connected to the Arabian horse, not to the Central Asian horse, which has more ribs. But even the genetics of the Central Asian horse has not yet been established. So the horse is different and indigenous. The chariots are there. The cities are there. The people are there. The continuity is there. Continuity even of fire altars, continuity of artifacts and symbols like the people leaf or the swastika, continuity on all levels. And yet, because of these kinds of linguistic theories, people are saying, oh, they must come from the outside. But Vedic Sanskrit is the most self-contained of all the Indo-European languages, has the most etymologically consistent roots for all, whether it's fire, Agni, whether it's river name, Saraswati. There's no outside influence there. It's an indigenous basis. And it was also part of a vast civilization. There were other connections to it in various directions. But the archaeology and the genetics and the geology is also supporting this. And even the astronomy, the ancient texts of the Vedas speak of Kritika equinox, which is at least 4,000 or 5,000 years. They have various astronomical positions that can be read. So there's really no evidence showing this Aryan invasion. In fact, they've given it up and tried to make it into a migration. But we can't find evidence of a migration either, whether in terms of skeletons or encampments or anything else. So it's time to rewrite the history books and to honor the Indic tradition, the Vedic tradition. This is not to exclude anyone else. Even Rig Veda may be just one book from that tradition. There may be many others that have been lost. There may have been other strains. They speak of 5 Vedic peoples who were connected to different parts of India, from Yadus in southwest to Anus and Druyus, even into Central Asia. So a very vast tradition that must be honored. And we have to rewrite our ancient history, honoring the sages, not only in Bharat, but all throughout the world. They talk about the 7 sages, the great ancient ones. And we need to recognize we have a spiritual, yogic root as a species. We're not just coming out of the kind of primitive backgrounds that the Western historians would see. We must honor the ancients, and we must look to our eternal wisdom to take us forward and recognize in Upanishads, 4,000 years ago, however much you want to date them, there is still the clearest description of a science of consciousness, self-realization, understanding the mind, going beyond the mind, and coming into contact with a universal awareness that pervades all of nature, that is our true self, and that is our ultimate goal. So we need to honor that science of consciousness through the Vedas, as well as the historical model. But it is this great spiritual essence that we need to give priority to.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's an opportunity in India with the new education policy to relook at some of our historical texts. And I believe we must teach spiritual knowledge as well to our children, so that they're able to handle the fast changing world. We're going to open it up to questions from the audience now, but I have one question for Shambhavi ji, which I will keep for the end. It is for the very difficult year of 2020. Because I know you are into astrology as well, but we'll come to that. If we can just have some of the questions from the audiences. Vamadeva ji, this is a question by Vishal Nehra, that how do we move yoga away from focus on physical goals? It's a criticism, but probably a fair criticism, what Vishal is saying, on physical goals, particularly in the West, to make it more connected to the traditional spiritual, which is a deeper component of it. And how do we stop the commodification of the tradition? There's beer yoga now. I've seen that. I mean, that's a little bizarre.
Yes. Unfortunately, the West likes to physicalize everything because it's a very physically based culture. And yoga has become franchises. It's become exercise. It's become a youth movement in some areas. It's become a fitness movement in the gyms. I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, but that is not the essence of yoga. One, we emphasize studying the traditional texts like Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras defines yoga as samadhi, and the whole text is about samadhi or sanyama. Asana only has 3 out of, 200 sutras, whereas samadhi, sanyama has probably 150 about that. Self-realization, also Bhagavad Gita. We can see the same teachings there. And to go to the great yoga gurus of modern India, whether it's Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Anandamayi Ma, Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, and connect yoga to Vedanta. Yoga is integrally connected to Vedanta. Yoga is the union of the individual self with the universal self. Vedanta teaches the way that can be understood, the approach to it through mind, consciousness, and awareness. So making yoga and Vedanta together is also part of it, and emphasizing the deeper teachings of yoga, including deeper pranayama, mantra, meditation, self-inquiry, self-realization, of which the physical asana is just the foundation to help us move into meditation. I think this is what we need to do and make yoga more an individual practice than just simply a kind of a group activity.
Interesting. And those are wise words of advice. And yeah, you're right in the sense there's nothing wrong with more interest in yoga, but it shouldn't stop there. We must go deeper. Perhaps that is it's certainly wise advice. If we can have the next question, Vineet, if that can be put up, or I'm threatening to ask my own question then. If you don't put a question up. Okay, no, there was some that had come up, but I guess it's delayed. So Shambhaviji, if I can ask you one thing, because I do know that you do follow astrology closely, and but whatever you may choose to share, it's up to you. This year 2020 has I mean, almost everything that could go wrong is going wrong. It's not just the pandemic. Every country, China has had the worst floods in living memory. Australia had these massive forest fires. India had we had a locust attack. We had the strongest cyclone up the east coast. We had a cyclone up the west coast that hadn't happened in 100 years. I mean, what is going on in this year? What does astrology say about it? Vineet, we'll come back to this question later. Let Shambhaviji answer, then you can put this question back up. Sorry, Shambhaviji, go ahead.
I think a more deeper reality is unfolding for everybody. And as a person who is using the Jyotish, and luckily I've been, explained and guided into the Jyotish by Vamadevaji, I strongly believe that we cannot blame the planets. The planets are merely raising a flag to everyone all over the world that we have to go back to understand our inner truth and reality. So what the planets are doing is that even like when we have a Kala Sarpa Yoga, which we've been having, I know that we astrologers love to blame, Mars is transiting, Saturn, but no planet wants to punish us. Trust me, that's my personal experience. They are just trying to create a deeper awareness. So they're ringing a bell. But we don't seem to listen, and we hide behind the truth and then blame all the planets. So Mars is transiting, so I'm going to be very angry for the next 2 weeks. Mars is not a planet of anger. Mars is a planet of focus, determination, deeper definition of truth and reality. So why would Mars make me angry, when its transit is impacting me. It is merely raising a flag that be careful, because these are the emotions that might erupt. Same with Shani. I mean, I do one Jyotish consultation every day, and everybody's so fearful of Shani. They've all been to some of the greatest astrologers, and they are in this sense of fear that, oh, Shani is going to, punish me. But Vamadeva ji and I, though at a few days ago, we studied very important astrology of of all the political leaders, especially concerning, America and the elections, and also what's happening, whether it's the Indian chart, whether it's the American chart or the European chart. We also looked at Italy's chart. But I think the planetary situation is trying to give us a deeper message. And in America, I think the fires, which are so crazy, now we have really moved into the forests. The forests need to be nurtured. The forests need to be maintained, need to be cultivated. And for me, I feel that these fires, especially in America, are reflecting our anger. Everybody here is very angry for whatever reasons, but nature is trying to raise a flag that what are we really angry about? So the same way I look at all the planets. No planet wants to really punish us, and we cannot blame entirely the planets. These dashas, these transits have come and gone in our lives, in the rishis' lives. There will always be turbulence in nature. There will always be turbulence in the earth. But today, we don't want to take any responsibility. So it's so easy to just blame the planets. This is what is happening with the planets, so this is what is going to unfold. But I strongly, as an astrologer, do not want to blame the planets. I feel we need to look deeper at the energy of the planets. Some planets have very powerful energies which can steer or shape our lives and existence. But that doesn't mean that they are trying to create havoc in our lives. They are alerting the whole world. We have neglected nature, we have neglected the earth. I mean, even the fires that we are having now, we're only concerned about human beings, but my heart always moves out to the birds, the animals, the serpents. Where do they go? No helicopter can rescue them. We even then can, run away. They have no place to run away. Do we ever even think of the animals, the birds who made their nest for winters, their babies, their eggs? I think we have to move out of this I, me, mine fixation and embrace the entire universe. We are so caught up. I always say to every sadhak that we must learn to revolve around the universe. The universe cannot revolve around you and me, Amish. We must come back to that basic truth that unless we don't learn to revolve around the universe, we are always going to find fault with the Brahman.
What a beautiful way of. I think I'm going to use that line somewhere in some book. What a powerful, wonderful line. We have to learn to revolve around the universe and not expect the universe to revolve around us. And it's true. It's almost a disease in the modern day. The selfishness and that everything has to revolve around me. It's true. And Sandeep has just put up a comment, very empowering explanation of planets. Otherwise, astrologers only scare people with planets. Very true, Sandeep. Which is why one should listen to Shambhavi ji and keep coming back to the Nehru Centre to see wonderful programs like this. I think we have time for one more question, if possible, guys. Okay, Sandeep, once again, spirituality in daily life. Do you think that without going through all the ashramas, which is brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, of course, all of you know, in life one can be truly enlightened by reading scriptures only. Vamadev ji, would you like to take this spirituality in daily life? Can one?
Yes. Yes. First of all, I would like to define yoga as moment-by-moment awareness. You may have techniques, practices, those are all fine, but the essence of yoga is moment-by-moment awareness from waking, dream, and deep sleep, and the consciousness behind it. And in daily life, the most important thing we have is approaching everything with awareness and consciousness and observation. And we do, Sri Aurobindo said a yogi can do anything better than a non-yogi because a yogi will come with awareness and focus to the task. In fact, in my view, karma yoga is the pursuit of excellence, not for our personal self, but for the universal being. So yoga is, all life is yoga. Aurobindo also said that. Yoga is the essence of life. Ashrams are like places you go. They're very helpful. Some people will teach there, live there, certainly. But also we have our lives and we need to be connected to all of nature, to the universal life, to all of humanity and the rest of it. And today it's essential to change our society that we bring yoga, spirituality, Vedanta into daily life. Vivekananda spoke of practical Vedanta, Ramatirtha, Chinmayananda, Swami Dayananda of the Arsha Vidya, all of that. So that legacy is there for us as well. So there's no choice. Our life should be yoga and spirituality, or it's going to create negative karmas, mental toxicity, and all the rest of it. All life is sacred. Your inner being is sacred. All of nature is sacred. Let us honor that and live that, and we can change the world at whatever level it is.
What a wonderful thought to end this conversation on, that if we can live consciously with the path of yoga, we can change the world, and all of us can improve the world in our own small way. And if all nearly 8 billion of us do that, the world will be far better. On that wonderful thought, thank you so much, Vamadev ji, Shambhavi ji. Both of you are like my elders. You know that. I respect you deeply, and you have honored the Nehru Centre by coming here. And the last 1 hour has been a wonderful hour of wisdom for all our viewers here in the UK. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining in from the US. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Reincarnation. India showed us what it's really about. India, it's so alive. Ayurveda had to be born here. Life flows through the air here, healing the body, reawakening the spirit. Ayurveda showed us you don't have to wait for reincarnation. You can be reborn in this life.
Incredible India.